All right, today we're going to talk about something huge. We're going to completely flip the script on one of the most basic stories we tell ourselves, how human civilization actually began. You know, everything you learned in school about how farming led to cities, and then cities led to big grand monuments. Yeah, that whole story might be completely backward. Okay, let's dive in.
So I want you to just chew on this question for a second. What if massive, organized ritual and even religion didn't come after society got settled? What if it was the very thing that created it? I know, it sounds kind of nuts, but the new evidence coming out is forcing us to rethink, well, everything. And you can see the problem laid out perfectly right here. On the left, that's the standard story we all know, right? First comes farming, that gives you extra food, that allows people to stop wandering and settle down in cities, and only then, way down the line, do they have the time and the people to build big monuments. But then you look at the right. This is the reality from places like Karahan Tepe in Turkey. We're talking massive, multi-ton stone monuments built around 9,600 BCE by hunter-gatherers, people with no farms, no cities. So, how and why? That question mark? That's the whole mystery we're going to unravel today.
The answer seems to lie in a new framework called the Deep Symbolic Systems Model, or, DSSM for short. And let me be clear, this isn't about ancient aliens or some lost advanced civilization. Nope. It's a way of understanding how our own minds work with the world, and it suggests a totally new sequence of events for how we got here.
So the core idea of DSSM, and it's simple, but honestly it's pretty profound, is just this. What if we have the entire story backward? It argues that our symbolic thinking, our shared beliefs, our rituals, our myths, that stuff didn't show up as a fun little extra after we built cities. No. It was the operating system. It was the software that allowed our ancestors to coordinate and build complex societies in the first place.
So how in the world does that happen? Well, this isn't just some vague idea. DSSM actually proposes a really clear four-stage process. This is the mechanism, the how-to guide, that takes simple, everyday actions and scales them all the way up into forces that can build a civilization. Let's walk through them.
It all starts in the body. Stage 1 is what's called embodied symbolic familiarity. Forget big abstract thoughts for a second. Just think about muscle memory. Think about making a stone tool the exact same way every single time, or a specific gesture. That physical repetition creates a shared, intuitive feel for a pattern. It's an understanding that you feel in your bones, way before you think about it in your head. This is the absolute bedrock of shared meaning.
Okay, so next, those repeated actions become ritualized. This is what happens when you add social rules or constraints. So maybe you only chip flint at dawn, or you only do it in a special part of the cave. These little rules make the pattern predictable, and more importantly, they make it teachable. This is how you stabilize the meaning across the whole group and pass it down from one generation to the next.
Now, as these rituals and shared ideas get more and more complex, your brain's hard drive starts to get full, right? Human memory can only hold so much. And that leads us to stage 3, material amplification. The ideas have to get externalized, dumped out into the physical world, into a carved totem, a painting on a cave wall, or eventually a giant stone circle. Now here's the key thing. The stone doesn't create the meaning. It just amplifies and preserves the symbolic stuff that already exists in the group's rituals.
And finally, we get to cognitive offloading. This is when that external thing, the monument, or much later a system of writing, becomes so stable that it kind of takes on a life of its own. It holds the memory and the authority outside of any single person's brain. The monument itself starts telling people how to behave, what's important. It organizes them. And that frees up everyone's mental energy to think about other stuff. This right here is the very beginning of what we'd call institutions.
The engine that drives this whole four-stage process is a concept called symbolic load. Just think of it like the collective weight of all the shared meanings, rules, and stories a culture has. As that load gets heavier and more complicated, it puts this incredible pressure on the group. You either have to offload it into something physical and permanent, or the whole system collapses under its own weight. That pressure is what forces people to build, to create, to innovate.
And you've got to remember, this didn't happen in a flash. It wasn't some sudden cognitive revolution where someone woke up one day and decided to build a society. The actual hardware in our brains that allows for this kind of thinking evolved over an incredibly long time.
I mean, just look at this timeline. Our modern brain size was in place 300,000 years ago, but it took another 200,000 years before we even see consistent symbolic stuff like using ochre for color, and almost 300,000 years before hunter-gatherers built places like Karahan Tepe. What this shows us is amazing. Our brains had the capacity for a long time. It was the slow, gradual buildup of symbolic culture, through those 4 stages that took all that time to cook.
Okay, so let's bring it all back and solve that puzzle we started with. How did nomadic hunter-gatherers build these massive monuments? Well, the simple answer is they had to. The monument wasn't some trophy they built after their society was successful. It was the tool they used to create that society in the first place.
The author of these ideas, Anthony von Doom, has this quote that just nails it. Technology is fossilized ritual. Man, just think about that for a second. It's such a powerful idea. It means our tools, our buildings, our technologies, they aren't just objects. They're the physical bodies of old, repeated, stabilized practices.
And you can see this everywhere once you start looking. A stone tool. It's not just a sharp rock. It fossilizes the rules, the grammar of how to hit something just right. Agriculture? That fossilizes ancient rituals of watching the sun and the stars, of knowing when to plant. Even something as boring as bureaucracy, that's just a fossilized ritual of who owes what to whom. All of our technology is built on this foundation of repeated action.
Which brings us to this absolutely stunning conclusion: the complete reversal of the story that we have been telling ourselves for generations. It turns out that monuments, these massive, awe-inspiring stone structures, they did not come from civilization.
No, civilization came from the monuments. The incredible, difficult, coordinated act of building these huge shared ritual centers. That was the process that forced hunter-gatherers to organize their labor, to stabilize their beliefs, and to develop the complex social structures that we eventually call civilization. The monuments were the cause, not the effect.
So here's the final takeaway, the whole thing in a nutshell. First, a super slow buildup of repeated symbolic rituals created the mental framework for society. Second, as the symbolic load of all those rituals got too heavy for human memory, they were offloaded into massive permanent monuments. Third, those monuments then acted like giant non-biological computers, organizing principles that made possible the large-scale coordination needed for cities and farming down the road. The standard story isn't just a little bit wrong. It has the entire causal arrow pointing in the exact wrong direction.
And that's the thought I want to leave you with. If we could get the fundamental story of our own origins backward for so long, what other big stories, what other foundational ideas about our world, our technology, or even ourselves might we also have completely upside down?
We have really only scratched the surface of this today. It's a huge, fascinating topic. So if this has sparked your curiosity and you want to dive into the actual research, you can explore all the original papers on the Deep Symbolic Systems Model. We've dropped a link to the author's page right there in the description below. Thanks so much for joining me.